Hi, my name's Tim Kelly, and we're coming from Our Lady of Light Ministries Convention and Event Center in Cincinnati, Ohio. And just want to let you know what a beautiful facility this is. If you've never been here, it is just wonderful, has great settings with it itself. And if you're not sure about it, just go to their website, ourladyoflight.org, and you'll see all different things that the ministry is doing right now. I think I got a really good one for you guys today. We are bringing back someone who was here on September 1st for the 31st anniversary of Our Lady of Light. And on the Day of Mercy, Ed did a talk, and it was so great. Everybody came up and said, we got to get this guy back here again. So there's a chapter in his book that we think is very special, and Ed's going to highlight it. And he is an author, he's a speaker, and the name of his book is The Mystic Next Door. Could you all please help me welcome Ed Joseph?
Well, thank you, Tim. Thank you for having me here. I'd like to thank the Our Lady of Light Ministries and for the opportunity to come back here and speak again. It's a wonderful place. I've been asked to talk about a couple of chapters in my book, but this one is the lifeguard duty. And when I was a kid, I was hired at an open water beach in Pennsylvania. I know that's kind of an oxymoron, but it was on a lake, a very big beach. And on the weekends, we would see crowds, maybe 12,000 over the weekend. It was absolutely just packed full of people. And again, I was a 15-year-old boy. It's my first job, and one of those crowded days, hear a scream. Now, it sounds funny because that's all you could hear. The thousands of people in the water jammed elbow to elbow, and I hear a scream, and I know it's important. And I look at it, and there's a young girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, looking at me and screaming. And while she's screaming, she's holding the elbow of another young child just out of the water, and I understand that child is drowned. And I jump off my lifeguard chair, and I run down the beach, and I run into the water, and I swim out to them. And they're in deep water. I mean, for them, 5 foot deep at least, way over their head. And I pull the girl to safety, and all I see is, when I get there, is a purple arm. And I get the girl up onto the beach. I had blown my whistle to warn the other lifeguards, but it was so loud no one heard me, and no one really saw what happened until I got the girl up on the higher part of the beach, which was actually it was grass, a very hard slope. I placed her with her head up towards the top of the slope, and I started to do CPR. And the crowd started gathering around me, and I did everything I was supposed to do. I tried to clear her airway, and I knew she had water. I did a maneuver to push the water out, and a little bit of water came out, but nothing I did could save this girl. Nothing would let air into her lungs. And she was just the most awful color, just purple. And I started screaming in my mind. I was panicked. And I screamed, "Help me, God, help me." But then this voice answered very calmly, "Place her head by the water." And I answer, "Help me, God, help me." And the voice again says, "Place her head by the water." Nothing I could do was clearing her airway. Minutes have gone by. She hasn't taken a breath. And I finally plead one last time, "Help me, God, help me." And the voice grows firm. And it says, "Place her head by the water. She has too much water in her body. You must place her head by the water and let the slope drain the water out of her." So I stopped doing my procedures, and I go to pick her up, and by now a ranger and hundreds of people have gathered around, and he places his hand on my shoulder. And he says, "Ed, you can't stop. You have to keep doing CPR until help arrives." And I yell at him, and I say, "I have to place her head by the water. The slope is going to drain the water out of her." And so he helps me, and we turn her around, and we place her head down by the water, and I do the clearing maneuver again, and I push on her stomach, and Water flows out of her mouth like a river. So much water. I would have never been able to get that water out. And as soon as I pushed on her stomach and all of that water came out, she coughed. And coughing is absolutely just a sound of happiness to a lifeguard, because if you're coughing, you're breathing. She instantly turned back to a normal shade, or the color came right back into her, and she started crying. And at that point, the ranger picked her up, and he carried her up just as the ambulances were arriving. At this point, I roll over onto my butt, and I sit on the grass, my head between my knees. And the next thing I know, one person after another pats me on the shoulder and tells me, "Good job, nice job." And I'm thinking to myself, I was a fraud. I didn't save her. That voice did. And then I thought, what was that voice? Later I would walk up, and I felt I owed the ranger an apology for yelling at him in front of all of those people. I was just a kid. He is a grown man. And as I approached him, he stuck his hand out to shake mine, and he said, "I'm very proud of you. You were so calm." And I thought I wasn't calm at all. I was panicked. I was a mess. And I apologized for screaming at him. And he said, "What do you mean you didn't scream at me? You never screamed." He said, "You were so calm and collected. You knew exactly what to do. And it was the right move." The whole time, though, I felt like I was a fraud, because what was that voice? I didn't save that girl. It was the voice. It would end up that later, much later, 20 years later, that same voice would save one of my own children. And then ultimately, it would save me. And I knew that voice as truth. And it's part of this story of how God works in our lives every day. And the things that He is setting up today for us may not take effect. We may not need what He has placed in our lives for decades, but He is always working. And He laid the foundation for a very important lesson that I was going to need to know in my future.